Good morning, everybody. Welcome to IGTV. This is a production of New York City InfoGuard. We have with us today John Phelps from Access Communications up in the grand state of Massachusetts. All right,
Yeah,
John, coming from your academy offices, it looks great in the background behind you.
thank you.
We've got what this week? The differences between HDTV and Megapixel.
Correct. Yes. Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Joe. Yeah, primarily this morning, I'm going to discuss some of the differences with the two buzzwords in our industry right now. Everybody seems to want, a megapixel camera and or an HDTV camera. And logically, it makes a lot of sense. We're used to seeing that at home. We go home, we watch our your huge HD TVs on our bedroom walls or our living room walls. So we obviously want to see that in our surveillance applications as well. And primarily the differences, megapixel. It just means 1 million or more pixels. You can have a 1 megapixel or a 5 megapixel camera, and that just references the number of pixels on the actual image sensor grid. It gives you, more resolution, more usable information, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee you any consistency among vendor cameras. If you compare ours with anybody else's strictly megapixel, there may not be an actual consistent picture between them because it just in the number of pixels. And so here we are in Axis, really pushing an HDTV video solution because there are standards, there are certain requirements with HDTV that we need to adhere to. HDTV, first of all, is going to have that 16 by 9 aspect ratio, which we see again on our big screen LCD TVs at home. Megapixel could be a 4 by 3, could be a 5 by 4, it could be whatever aspect ratio the vendor wants or whatever you can squeeze onto screen. So that 16:9 gives you much more real estate coverage. Obviously, you have a much wider horizontal and vertical image, which can be very, very useful to get a grand coverage of, parking areas, things like that. Other requirements in HDTV are going to be the color representation. Red is definitely going to be red, and blue is definitely blue. There's no shade, if, ands, or buts. Those color representations have to be exact. The frame rate requirement, we have to hit 30 frames per second in HDTV format, whether it be 720p or 1080p or 1080i. You have to have 30 frames per second. Megapixel, again, on the other side of the coin, there are vendors out there that are making 8, 10, 12, 16 megapixel cameras, but if you look at frame rate to get that maximum resolution, 15, 16 megapixel per instance, you may be hitting 3 or 4 frames per second. That may be good enough for your environment that you're trying to capture. However, that will never be able to hit HD standardization because that standard says 30. So those attributes give us guaranteed color representation, the frame rate, the aspect ratio, so that it'll fit any TV that's an HD TV monitor will fit the picture perfectly. One of the other great things about our HD TV cameras is we have the ability to rotate the image from that 16 by 9 aspect ratio to also a 9 by 16 ratio. So you could use it much more effectively in a hallway or a long aisle, for instance, in a retail environment where you get the length of the hallway but not the walls or not the racks of food, for instance, that you don't necessarily care about. So those differences can be huge. So comparing, our camera that's HD TV to somebody else's, you're going to get the same picture quality. You're going to get the same attributes. Where they come in handy, especially looking at HD TV over megapixel, again, is you guarantee color representation, which is very important. So you have that much more usable real estate that you can cover. But also, because of even megapixel, the density of pixels is there. And as we were discussing previously, getting facial recognition or any kind of identification, because you have more pixels, you're able to actually enlarge the image more often before it breaks down. If you take a VGA resolution image, for instance, and blow it up, let's say, 200%, you're going to see distortion. You're going to see some ugliness drop into that picture because of the lack of overall resolution. Whereas with an HD or megapixel, you can blow it up 200% and it doesn't break down. It may break down at 400%, but it gives you the ability, to see my blue eyes, for instance. If I want to see what color eyes I have, I can zoom in much more tightly on an HD or megapixel image because of that fact. So you have that ability to use. HD and megapixel cameras may not be absolutely what you need. If you have a very finite space, if you only have an area 3 feet wide, for instance, that you're trying to capture from 4 feet away, a VGA camera will certainly give you the pixel density to do so. But if you need to be able to zoom in after the fact, for instance, on that 3 foot wide doorway on somebody's name tag hanging on his chest, then you may want that additional pixel count just to be able to magnify that image that much more. So those kind of intricacies are really where HD and megapixel come in, and the difference again being that there's no guarantee with pixel quality or image quality on pixel count versus HD, which guarantees you. There's two standards that we have to adhere to. The SMPTE, the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, says, Axis, if you want to put HDTV network video, on your products, they have to meet the 274M and the 269M standards, guaranteeing these different frame rates and formats and color representation. So those are very, very important. So the count of pixels, yes, it's important for more information. However, it may not be as usable with HD. If you imagine an HD picture, 720p picture, that only requires slightly under 1 million pixels. It's 1280 by 720, do the math, it's about 950,000 pixels. Still significantly more than VGA, which is about 340,000 pixels, but not quite actually 1 full megapixel. But 1080p, for instance, is about 2 million pixels. So again, it's a 2 megapixel image sensor, but its standard is HDTV. We have several cameras that do 3 and 5 megapixel in megapixel, but we scale them back for HD. We do a 1080p picture on them, and we only really require the 2 million pixels, so we can actually get the frame rate and the color representation that way. So it is important to know the difference, and it also is important to know how to use those numbers of pixels. As I mentioned, you want to cover an entire parking lot, or you want to cover a football field from a 50-yard line. Yes, a high megapixel camera will do it, but remember, in the live viewing, the people, those little football players, are going to be very, very small relative to the entire scene that you're covering. But because you have pixel density, you'll be able to zoom in on them after the fact, and you'll be able to see them forensically for identification purposes after. So that's really what HD gives you, or megapixel gives you. So I'm not sure if there's any questions, Joe, from you, but that, in a nutshell, is HD and megapixel.
No, that's terrific, John. I appreciate that. And
Sure, no problem.
I think our viewers and the people who view this later on will view it and be excited about that as well. I'm just trying to bring everything into full view here so that we're both.
Sure, no problem.
Okay. So when you look at this, if I'm seeing and viewing the video, would it be possible for you later on just to go into our chat and could you connect some links onto our chat with that as well? Just put to draw everybody's attention to where on your website they should be looking at it.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
Because we want to keep that up there for a week. That way, people
Sure.
will have a chance when they view the video. We can always tell them later on, hey, look, John Phelps has included some Access Communication website links that are pertinent to this talk as well.
Sure, absolutely. I'll be more than happy to put those up there. There's a lot, as you mentioned earlier. There's a lot of useful information, for the industry. It's not Access specific, even though it's on our website. We really do want to just enlighten everybody to the benefits of not only Axis products but IP in general. So yeah, I'll be more than happy to put that information up there, and there's going to be videos linkable off our website that will show VGA versus megapixel versus HD as well. So all that information I will glad to link up for you.
Yeah, one of the things where you really hit I guess something, an alarm went off in my head, is when you started talking about the industry standards. That's a big thing to people. All right, people always, they want to be in some sort of compliance or in some sort of conformity. They don't want to be thinking that they're buying more than what's out there or less than what's out there. But if they're at the industry standard, people feel pretty comfortable with that. So
absolutely, absolutely.
With some of those standards, if you can include that would be good, because I think
sure,
we need to push that more out there so people understand that there actually is a standard.
Absolutely, it's important to know that. I mean, as I mentioned, I could build one image sensor, Joe. You could build another, and there's absolutely no guarantee, even in the same camera with the same lens, that the pictures are going to look the same. There's just no standardization. Whereas with HD, following those standards, your picture, my picture is going to have to look the same. So that standardization it's important.
Yeah, and I think that's really where the industry starts to, really, dig in and get some good things going on for everybody out there. Where there's
absolutely
standardization, and then people can start talking, from any, what I call a kind of like a 360-degree view. All right, we're all the same standard. Okay, let's take all the BS out of this. If we're not meeting that standard, then we're not there yet.
Exactly, and that's one of the greatest compliments to IP video in itself, is that it is such a standards-based environment. Analog, everybody's analog camera, even in their own family of cameras, can be vastly different just because of the lack of standardization. Yes, they're all 4CIF or 2CIF or whatever resolution they might be, but that's pretty much where it lies. You change lenses, you could have a vastly different picture, but IP, the IP network is all standards based, and then the cameras are all going to be standards based going forward with HD and things like that. So it's going to just make consistency.
Yeah,
and interoperability.
Yeah, very exciting for the industry. Hopefully a year after Times Square, hopefully we'll build some energy and as well maybe gotten a few more implementations out there. So God forbid something does go wrong out there, we'll be prepared, and hopefully we can take that down from, I think what they said was a 54-hour, from time to incident to time to capture. And maybe what we'll do is we'll absolutely prevent it, because people will
absolutely
see, that's
the dream. We all have that wish and that dream. If it wasn't for forensics, CSIs, doing their job, a lot of times what we see for video released by the news media, you can't tell if it's a human being, let alone if it's the guy standing next to you. So
yeah, no, I hear you. All right, good talk. Great to have you on the program again. All right,
absolutely.
Next month.
Absolutely, Joe. Take care now.
All right, bye now.